They were not gods. They were not kings. Yet they marched like machines forged in iron. The Roman soldiers, men whose discipline turned empires into dust, men who bled long before they ever stepped onto a battlefield, because their true war began in training. Before a Roman ever swung his sword in battle, he had already survived something far more brutal. Picture the silence before dawn. The world still cloaked in shadow. The air so cold it bites the skin. Mist clinging low to the earth, swirling like restless spirits. Then, suddenly, a sharp sound tears the silence apart. The trumpet blast, the cornu, the signal that there is no rest. No merci, no comfort. All across the camp, men rise as one. Thousands. The creak of leather straps, the rattle of iron buckles, the scraping of sandals against gravel. There is no hesitation. No one dares linger. Every soldier already knows what waits for him. Another day of punishment. Another day of survival. Training begins before the sun itself climbs into the sky. The recruits are handed swords. Not the gladius, the sharp steel weapon of war, but a crueler thing. A training sword made of oak. Twice as long, twice as heavy. A burden disguised as a weapon. The first time a man holds it, he feels strength. The second hour, he feels strain. The third hour, he feels pain. And by the fourth, when his arms burn and his shoulders tremble, when his grip begins to slip from the sweat and the blisters split open, he realizes the truth. This sword is not here to teach him how to kill. It is here to see if he can endure. Again and again, the recruits swing. The air fills with the sound of wood striking wood, of oak slamming against the thick wooden posts that stand like silent enemies. The sound echoes like thunder across the field. It is a battlefield without blood. But make no mistake, men bleed here too. The shield is no different. It is heavier than the real scutum, thick enough to rattle the arm each time it blocks. The soldier raises it again and again until his bones feel like they will snap. The weight drives fire into his shoulders, into his back, into his very soul. Why? Because when the real shield is finally strapped to his arm, it will feel light as air. The Roman way was cruel, but it was effective. And then comes the march. Always the march. 10 miles. 15. 20. Sometimes more. All in a single day. All in perfect formation. The recruits march across gravel roads, across fields, through forests, through rivers so cold it feels as though the bones themselves are turning to ice. The weight is unbearable. Armor clings to the chest, leather straps cutting into skin. The shield rests heavy on one arm. The wooden sword, still damp with sweat and blood, at his side. And the pack, rations, tools, stakes for fortifications, spare clothing, 40 kilograms pressing down with every step. Feet blister, skin tears, blood seeps through sandals. And still, the line does not break. For in Rome, a man who faltered did not simply shame himself. He shamed his entire legion. And shame in Rome was punished more cruelly than wounds. So they march, one after another, step by step, until the earth itself trembles beneath the rhythm of their boots. It is not the march of chaos. It is not the stumble of peasants. It is order. It is rhythm. It is one living wall moving forward. Imagine standing at a distance, watching them approach. Helmet crests glinting in the morning sun. Shields flashing like mirrors. The sound, thousands of sandals striking the earth together, again and again, like the beat of some colossal war drum. That sound alone could break weaker enemies long before the clash of steel. This is how Rome forged terror, not in battle, but in training. And when the sun finally rises above the horizon, when the mist burns away and the fields are bathed in gold, the men are already drenched in sweat. Their arms shake, their legs ache, their throats are raw from the dry air. Yet the day has only begun. For Rome demanded not just strength, not just endurance. Rome demandait transformation. And transformation requires suffering. The recruit who woke as a boy at dawn would not sleep as one that night. If he survived the day, he was one step closer to becoming something else entirely. A tool, a weapon, a Roman, but training was not only physical. It was psychological. It was cruel by design. Rome did not shape men with kindness. It shaped them with fear, with punishment, with the promise that failure would be worse than death. The recruit who staggered during a march, who lowered his shield too soon, who hesitated when ordered to strike, he did not simply draw scorn. He drew the lash. The whips cracked across bare skin, tearing flesh, leaving welts that burned for days. Every scar was a lesson. Every scar was a warning. And the beatings were not private. They were public. Every man was forced to watch. Because Rome knew, fear was more powerful when shared. If one man bled, the others learned. The commanders did not hate their soldiers. They broke them because the battlefield would break them harder. If a man could not endure the cruelty of his own officer, how could he endure the charge of screaming barbarians, of steel flashing, of death rushing toward him? But Rome's cruelty did not stop with the whip. Punishments reached into the soul. For cowardice, for desertion, for disgrace. Execution was swift. Mercy was absent. A deserter might be stoned. He might be clubbed to death by the very comrades he abandoned. Rome's message was clear. There is no escape, no forgiveness, no life outside the legion. And then there was the most infamous punishment of all. The word itself carried terror through every camp. Decimation. Decimation. If a unit failed Rome, if it retreated when it should have stood, if it disobeyed or dishonored the legion, the commander would order the ritual. The soldiers were divided into groups of 10. Each group drew lots, and the man upon whom the lot fell was marked for death, not by enemy hands, not by executioners, but by his own brothers in arms. Imagine the silence. 10 men stand together. One is chosen. His face pales. His hands tremble. He looks at his comrades, men who have marched with him, bled with him, suffered beside him. And then those comrades raise their weapons. Clubs, stones, swords. They do not want to kill him. But Rome demands it. Rome commands it. And so they strike. The chosen man falls, beaten to death not by strangers, but by the men he trusted most. The others watch. The others learn. Fear settles in their bones like ice. This was Rome's genius. To bind loyalty not with love, but with terror. To ensure that no man feared the enemy more than he feared Rome itself. But cruelty was not reserved only for punishment. It was built into every day. When the marching stopped, when the drills ended, there was no rest. The recruits did not collapse in a sleep. They worked. Always they worked. At the end of every march, a fortress rose from nothing. Every night, the legion built a camp strong enough to withstand an enemy assault. Trenches carved deep into the earth. Ditches filled with sharpened stakes. Walls of timber raised high. Tents arranged in perfect order, as precise as a city. No matter how exhausted the soldiers were, no matter how bloody their feet or raw their hands, the camp had to be built. Because Rome demanded readiness. Because Rome believed that comfort was the mother of weakness. And so, even in rest, they labored. Even in darkness, they drilled. Even in exhaustion, they obeyed. The body suffered. But the mind? The mind suffered more. Imagine the recruit, barely 19 years old. He wakes before dawn. He trains until his muscles scream. He marches until his feet bleed. He digs until his hands are torn raw. And when he finally lays down to sleep, it is on the cold ground, beneath a canvas sheet, surrounded not by family, but by strangers who might one day be forced to kill him if Rome demanded it. He is far from home. He dreams of his mother's voice, his father's farm, the laughter of siblings. But dawn comes, and the horn calls, and the dream dies. Every day, the same pain. Every night, the same fear. Many broke under it. Some deserted, knowing the risk. Some collapsed and never rose again. Some took their own lives, believing death kinder than Rome's mercy. But those who endured, those who bent without breaking, they became something else. The legion did not simply train soldiers. It erased men, and in their place, it created weapons. Weapons that marched. Weapons that obeyed. Weapons that killed without hesitation. Weapons with human faces and beating hearts, but stripped of doubt, stripped of weakness, stripped of choice. This was Rome's dark alchemy. to take flesh and bone, and through suffering, transform it into iron. By the time training was finished, the recruit who had once been a farmer, a shepherd, a son, was gone. In his place stood something colder, harder, something that could not be broken by hunger or pain or fear. And it was only now, after weeks of agony, that he was ready. Ready for the battlefield, ready for war, ready to kill, the battlefield, the final test. Everything the recruits had endured, every lash, every march, every punishment was preparing them for this. Because here, there were no drills, no wooden swords, no second chances. Here, the blades were real. Here, the screams were not rehearsed. Here, the ground drank blood. The legion marched into war as a machine. Shields locked, spears bristling, banners rising high above the dust. The air was thick with heat, with sweat, with the distant roar of enemies shouting curses in tongues they did not understand. And still, the legion moved in silence. Step after step, shield after shield. It was a silence more terrifying than noise. An army of men, trained to feel nothing, to show nothing, advancing like a storm across the earth. The horn sounded, the command was given, and the soldiers who had once been boys stepped forward into the fire. The clash was thunder. Metal rang against metal. Shields slammed. Spears thrust. Screams filled the air, human voices breaking under the weight of agony. And yet, the Roman soldier did not falter. His training spoke louder than fear. His body moved even when his mind wanted to stop. Every drill, every march, every punishment was carved into his muscles, burned into his bones. Raise the shield. Hold the line. Advance. Strike. Repeat. The battlefield was chaos, but the legion was order. And in that order lay victory. The soldier's arms trembled with exhaustion. His ears rang with the cries of the dying. His mouth tasted dust and iron. Yet he pressed on, because to fail Rome was worse than death. Because to survive meant nothing if the legion broke. Because discipline had erased the boy and left behind only the weapon. He was no longer a farmer, no longer a shepherd, no longer a son. He was Rome. Hour after hour, the battle raged. And still the legion held. Spears shattered, swords dulled, bodies littered the ground. But the line did not break. Enemies screamed, charging again and again. But they broke upon the wall of shields like waves upon a cliff. And when the horn sounded again, the legion did not simply survive. It crushed. It advanced. It destroyed. When the dust cleared, when the field was silent except for the moans of the dying, it was Rome that stood. Rome, uniding. Rome, éternelle. But victory came at a price. The soldier looked around him and saw the faces of comrades who would never rise again. Men who had marched beside him, trained beside him, suffered beside him, now lying still, their eyes glassy, their blood soaking the dirt. And yet, there was no time to mourn. The order came. The legion reformed. The march continued. Always forward. Always Rome. For the soldier, there was no escape. No home. No rest. Only the endless road, the endless war, the endless march beneath the eagle of Rome. And still he obeyed. Because obedience was all he knew. Because Rome had taken his fear, his hope, his life, and forged it into steel. This was the brutal genius of Rome. Not its generals, not its emperors, not its wealth or its monuments, but soldiers, men broken and remade by cruelty, men who endured what others could not, men who became the iron fist of an empire. Centuries later, their names are forgotten. Their graves lie unmarked, their voices lost to time. But the empire they built still casts a shadow across history. And their training, their suffering, became legend. Because Rome understood a truth that echoes through the ages. Empires are not built by marble or gold. They are built by flesh, by blood, by men who have been broken until they can no longer break. So when we remember Rome, we must remember them. The nameless, the faceless, the countless soldiers who bled into the earth so that Rome might rise. They were not kings. They were not gods. They were men, but men forged into something greater, something crueler, something eternal. They were the legion, and their brutal training was the price of Rome's immortality.